Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hey, everybody, what's going on? This is your man, Big B, Brien Hanley. Welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. Today, we have Sammy Mora, who covers the Utah Utes for 24/7 Sports. Huge game within the Big 12 Conference. Cincinnati, undefeated in Big 12 play, number 17th ranked in the country, coming to Utah, number 22 ranked, still has an opportunity to get to Arlington and play for a Big 12 title. Let's just start there. First off, Sammy, how are you doing?
I'm great. Another primetime opportunity for Utah to, finally show people what they're made of.
Absolutely. So let's start there at the beginning, what I was talking about. Still an opportunity to play for a Big 12 title to get to Arlington. Now, it's not a secret. The road is difficult. And the reason that the road is difficult, let's leave the schedule part out of it. It's the two losses that Utah has, those teams, like, even if let's just say you're trying to pass BYU, they have to lose 3 times. Now, doesn't mean it won't happen. Now, again, I don't get into all the tiebreakers. I'm sure there's a tiebreaker because I've heard that head-to-head doesn't matter. It's like 4th in the pecking order, which to me, that is absolutely insane that head-to-head is 4th in the pecking order. I just don't understand. And again, that's not anything against Utah. Yeah. I wouldn't care who it was. That just doesn't make sense to me, but whatever.
I will say we have a breakdown on utezone.com called okay. Not Dead Yet, an exact play-by-play of what needs to happen for Utah to get into the Big 12 title game. So if you have a second, if you're interested, you can go over to Utezone and read it. But yeah, our publisher Dan Sorensen broke down a 4 or 5 different or 2 scenarios, the most possible ones of how it would work and stuff. But yeah, so there is people have put in the effort to figure it out. I have not, but other people have. So.
Yeah, I'm and to be quite honest, everybody, I am not going to put the effort in until the time comes. And the reason being is because the first thing that everybody can do on their bingo card is win. Mm-hmm. If you're not going to win, then it doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. So it'll get closer. Things will figure themselves out a little bit, but just continue to win. And I think that's where Utah has to start, is just go win the games. And then we'll go from there, Sammy.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing is winning out. And, Devin Dampier told us on Monday, he said that, every time that this team is lost, they've bounced back in the right way. But this team is very well aware now that they cannot suffer another loss. Like, they need to handle business. And, you said, let's not look at schedule, but I'm going to look at the schedule. And honestly, like, Cincinnati is probably, from my vantage point, it's probably the toughest game left on the schedule. After Cincinnati, Utah goes on bye next week. And, that's going to be very, very helpful, for guys like Dampier who are still a little banged up and stuff. And then you go to Baylor, which, Baylor kind of has fallen flat on their face a little bit after all the preseason expectations they had. You have Kansas State at home, which, sometimes Kansas State looks good and then sometimes they're not so good. And then you finish the season at Kansas on Black Friday. And, that game, I know, scares a lot of Utah fans with it being on a Friday right after Thanksgiving. But I think that this team has played well on the road so far this season. So I don't think that that's going to be a massive issue. But, all like after Cincinnati, I think Cincinnati's a winnable game too, but all of the other games on the rest of the schedule are also very winnable for Utah. I do think that there's a very good chance that Utah could finish 10-2, which would be like dream ideal situation considering Utah was 5-7 last season. So like it would be talk about just a complete 180. I mean, actually, you could say it's a 180. I mean, like a 180 would also be making it to the playoff, and like depending on how the rest of the conference looks up, there's the possibility of a Big 12 title berth. There's a chance of an at-large berth of the playoffs, depending on how everyone else is shaking out and stuff. So, the goals, I've been telling all of our subscribers over on Utezone, like the goals are still very much in front of this team. Like 2 losses does not define this team. The 2 losses that they've had have been in primetime games that have been
Right.
big time games, but like goals are still in front of them. They handled Arizona State with ease. They handled Colorado with ease. If they can handle Cincinnati with ease, I think that there's a case that you could argue that still the Utah's a top 3 team in the conference. I think that's my where I'm sitting, because top 2 is clearly still TCU or not TCU, Tech and Baylor, or God, Tech and BYU. Brain is just jumbled right now.
You couldn't even say BYU is the top team. I get it.
I'm not even going to get into that one. I'm not even going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. But I think Tech and BYU are still the top 2 teams in the conference, but you could make an argument that Utah is 3 if they can handle business versus Cincinnati this weekend. But that was a long answer for, it's still, everything's still in front of this team. Everything's left on the table. Everything is still up for grabs.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, look, and this Utah fans are going to be mad when I say this, but I think deep down, they know this is the truth. BYU got screwed out of a college football playoff appearance last year. You put in SMU, and the college football playoff committee basically told us that results on the field didn't matter. BYU goes to SMU and beats them. I don't care when it is. I mean, they acted like, early in the season games didn't matter compared to later season. I'm like, a win is a win. A loss is a loss. We beat you, but somehow you're better. It just didn't make sense to me. I thought their resume was better than SMU's. And that has me nervous for a team like Utah, because even if Utah doesn't make the Big 12 title game, which, again, they could win out, and that's still a real possibility. Mm-hmm. But their resume would look really, in my opinion, it would still look good, but then they're going to say, well, I don't know. And that's the only thing that's going to piss me off, because Utah is a good team, a very good team. Let me correct myself, a very good team. And to get left out on a technicality would be, first of all, be crushing for the conference. But I would say it's going to piss off Utah fans even more, because it's like, look, man, what are we doing here? Do you guys not watch football?
Well, and I think a lot of people, I mean, Utah's non-conference schedule was not the strongest. I think that's going to be something that pulls them down. UCLA has looked better in recent weeks, then also they laid an egg versus Indiana, which I was not expecting them to beat Indiana. I just thought it would be fun to see if
closer.
I thought they were going to at least push. But anyways, and then you have Cal Poly and you have Wyoming. Wyoming has 2 wins on the season, I think now. Yeah. So they're not great. Cal Poly's an FCS, so that doesn't help. The 2, you lose to Tech, you lose to BYU, you beat Arizona State, but Arizona State has had issues at quarterback as well this season. Tech has had issues at quarterback. So it's like there's going to be a lot of asterisks around Utah's games. But I do think if Utah, I'm trying to move on from the BYU game, but it just is one of those things that it keeps me up at night, because Utah outgained BYU in almost every single statistical category, except for time of possession and points. And I know points is the big one, and we've dragged Kyle over the coals about his lack of kicking field goals for the last 2 weeks, but that's another story. But I honestly think if Utah gets another crack at BYU, whether it be in the Big 12 title game or whatever, which I think is probably the most logical place, I do think that Utah has learned from their mistakes, and I think that team really wants to not let this become more of a streak than it currently is, because it's 3 games in a row now. The longest it got was 9. Utah had 9 games up until 2021. But, if Utah gets a second chance at either BYU or Tech, in a Big 12 title game, I think, I honestly like Utah's odds, especially, Tech wise, what's going on with quarterback. Hammond tore his ACL. Morton's been banged up ever since that Utah game. And so it's going to be interesting to see how they roll out, what Utah looks like. So, and it's really interesting. Like, I've always said that, the Pac-12 South gobbled each other up. Like, that was the big gripe against the Pac-12, especially the Pac-12 South, is they would just eat each other up. And I think to a certain extent, the Big 12 is starting to do that to themselves. Also, the teams that are supposed to be winning are not, and the teams that are supposed to be losing are winning. And, it's interesting, and it's fun to watch to a certain extent. When it's like your team is involved in it, it kind of gets a little like jittery and stuff. But I think this is the weird way of the conference. Like at this point last year, Utah fans were like checked out. They were like gone.
Yeah.
And like the fact that everyone is still very much locked in and ready to go, I think is massive for this team. And it's just going to help as, you come down the stretch.
Yeah. It's, the month of November is going to be very important, not just for everybody in the conference, but Utah especially.
Mm-hmm.
This past week, look, I'll be honest with you. I was going to talk to you a little bit about this past week, but there's no reason. It was an absolute destruction of a football game. I mean, I literally, and I told you before we got on, is I was like, I stopped watching. I just went to sleep after it was the middle of the second quarter. I don't even know it was the middle. It was like 11 minutes to go. I'm like, there's no sense in watching this football game anymore. Utah is so much more dominant. I'll also say this. Look, I'm a big Coach Prime supporter. His team quit on him. They flat out quit. And I think Utah had a lot to do with them quitting, is that they just beat them into submission so quickly and so one-sided.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest, Sammy, I don't even really want to spend a lot of time because that was a glorified scrimmage.
Yeah, I will say, I thought when we heard that Bird Ficklin was going to get his first career start, I thought that there was no better game for him to get a start because, looking at the tape, looking at the film, like, yeah, Colorado had been in some close games, but the one thing that they were really susceptible to majority of the season was the ground game. And I knew that Ficklin was able to run the ball like Devin Dampier was able to run the ball. And I knew that Utah's running backs were going to have a Parker, Rogers, Bray. I knew that those three were going to feast too.
Yes.
I did not think it was going to be 422 yards on the ground level of feasting. I also did not know that Morgan Scalley was going to blitz 70% of the time and come away with 7 sacks. But, it is what it is. I was an idiot. I could have easily started writing my story, like my post-game thought story and all my post-game content at halftime. But I was an idiot and I waited until the end of the game. So I could have been out of the stadium as soon as the game ended and as soon as the press conference ended. But I went back up to the box, did my little writing, and then left. But yeah, it was a game. That's what I'll say. It was sure a game.
Let me ask you this. Now, I heard some rumblings from some people at Utah, and you can either confirm or deny or plead the fifth. I always leave room to plead the fifth. I heard this was a little bit of a get-back game because Utah believed that Colorado ran the score up on them in 2024. So this was a little bit of a get-back game from last year when they thought that Utah – now, granted, here's the thing about me. I don't mind teams running up the score. Yeah. I'm like, hey, score as many points, and if the other team can't stop you, so be it.
Yeah.
Which is why I didn't mind what Utah did. 70. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was like, they just keep blitzing. But that's how you beat Colorado. Their offensive line's not any good. You just blitz them to death, make the quarterback who's jittery make a decision, which he can't do. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was perfect game planning. But is any of that true at all?
I honestly had not heard that. I hadn't heard that at all. But I think a lot of the guys on the team know what happened in the past is in the past, and they don't want to. This team is very much it's 50% new players from last year's team. Like, it was a complete roster overhaul, and so I think a lot of the guys are like, let's leave last year in the past and focus on the present. I mean, and Kyle Whittingham knows that style points matter. He very well aware of that the style points matter. I know Utah fans were pissed off that Texas Tech scored a couple of late touchdowns in the game earlier this season, but I'm like, again, style points. Like, they know that this is what they need to do to get more respect in like the College Football Playoff Committee's eyes. And so, and my thing is Utah, one of Utah's touchdowns, Nate Johnson's touchdown, his 58-yard score.
Mm-hmm.
That was very deep in the fourth quarter. Nate Johnson is part of the twos. Colorado had their twos out there. Utah had their full twos out there. If your twos can't stop another team's twos, I don't see why it's an issue. Like, at all. And like, the thing is like, Utah gave up the 7 points that Utah gave up to Colorado was because Utah put their twos in. Right. Like, all of Utah's late scores that have happened, given up late scores, have been because the twos have been in. Like, Utah very well pinches a shutout if the starters stay in. And if the starters stay in, I don't think it's 53. I think we're pushing 60 or 70.
I think it's 70.
Yeah, I think that, I could have ran for 200 yards on that defense, and I am 5'2" and have a bad knee. So, but that I digress with that. But I will say, like, Jordan Seaton struggled. He struggled. John Henry Daly was his matchup. Yeah, he struggled. He got flagged a couple of times. It was not great. At one point I looked up and he had JHD in a chokehold, basically, and I was like, bro. And then I saw the
Yeah.
flag fly in, and I was like, there it is. He struggled. Staub was able to come in and kind of get things going, but it was a little bit too late, I think, at that point.
It was a lot too late.
And I Utah fans are still thinking about that, how they had negative total yards at the end of the first half, which
That was disgusting.
I hadn't seen that like ever. I've been to a lot of games, and I've covered a lot of games, and I've watched a lot of football. I have never remembered seeing a team be negative total offensive yards at halftime. But I will say, Prime was funny after his press conference. In his press conference, he's like, "They're still blitzing us, and we're inside." I did get a laugh out of that, because that literally is how it felt. It felt like Utah just every single play was just send in the house, which took some pressure off the secondary, and which was good, because Utah's secondary has had some issues this season. But
right, I like the approach, and I would just I want to make it clear: if Utah would have scored 100 points, score 100 points. I just it's football.
Yeah,
everybody deserves an opportunity to play, whether it's the 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, the hundreds. I don't care. And their job is to go out there and play as hard as they can. And if they can score a touchdown, you go score it. Period.
Yep.
End of story.
Well, and Utah stopped passing the ball when they put Isaac Wilson in, because Isaac Wilson was the quarterback that went in when Bird got taken out. And Isaac passed the ball once. It was nearly intercepted. And then they were like, okay, we're done throwing the ball. We're done. And so they just ran the ball, and they were still able to run the ball with a high efficiency on Colorado's 2s with Utah's 2 group. So,
Yeah. It is what it is.
Literally, it is what it is. It was a fun game to watch, but thoughts and prayers to the homies out in Colorado.
Oof, brutal. So, moving on to Cincinnati. Cincinnati clearly brings some different challenges to this football game. They're pretty balanced on offense and defense, but more importantly, especially on offense, they're pretty balanced between running and passing the football. Their quarterback is mobile. He can run the football. Look, this was a team that early in the season, or before the season started, a lot of people thought, hey, if you don't win 6 or 7 games, they're going to get a new coach. That was what was going on with Cincinnati. Well, that has completely changed because they're thinking Big 12 title, at least get to the Big 12 conference title game, and they're thinking college football playoff. This is a huge game for them. But the different challenges, that they bring to Utah, what's the idea on how to stop them? Because again, they're pretty balanced. Sorsby can run it and throw it, but they can run it with other people as well.
I will first off like to pat myself on the back, because I did say preseason that Cincinnati would be a top half of the conference team, and people said I was crazy. So I would like to just pat myself on the back for that right now, because I saw the vision when I was doing my off-season previews and stuff. I could see what was being built there. They had a really good portal class and stuff, and a great high school class as well. And so, I saw the vision. I saw what they were doing, and I bought into it early. But I think, I have ever since Devin stepped onto campus, I've had a lot more faith in Utah's defensive abilities to contain mobile quarterbacks. I understand different schemes. I understand every mobile quarterback has a different scheme and a different whatever, but you have a lot of the same, base things where you run contain, you run this, you run that. Like, there's a lot of things that stay the same no matter who the mobile quarterback is. And Utah's done a good job for the most part at handling mobile quarterbacks all season. You start with the season with Nico at UCLA, you handled him with ease. You handled the mobile quarterbacks at West Virginia pretty well. You handled Jeff Sims at Arizona State pretty well. Hammond ran all over you, but Utah has a very bad habit of when backup quarterbacks get put in that they don't have time to prep for, they struggle. Bear Bachmeier, they contained him to the best of they contained him mostly. He still made some plays here and there, and that's the thing. I think people realize that, like, these players are good. These mobile quarterbacks are good, and they're starters for a reason. Like, they're gonna get a play on you or two. Like, it's not like the end of the world if one play
They
happens
give
type of thing.
scholarships to those guys too. I
Yeah,
think us as crazy fans, we don't realize that sometimes. We think it's only our team, but
yeah.
I'm like, yeah, they give scholarships out at these other schools
Yeah,
too.
they have NIL, they have all those
Yeah.
things. And then last week, Salter was a mobile quarterback again, and well, to be fair, like, he didn't even get a chance to do literally
No.
anything. He snapped the ball and John Henry Daly was in his face. But anyways, but Utah's done a good job at containing mobile quarterbacks. And I think that, that's something that's been a benefit for this team this year. There was Utah teams 2-3 years ago that if a mobile quarterback was out there, it was time to like panic because they didn't have a way to contain him because they weren't practicing against one. But I think, that's fun to watch. I think that, Sorsby is a good quarterback. I like watching him play. I think he's a good guy. He makes good plays. He's only turned the ball over once this season. He makes smart decisions with the ball. Utah's secondary, again, I keep saying this, they are going to be tested. And
Right.
and the thing is like, I thought last week they were going to get tested too versus Colorado, but with the 70% blitz rate, like, they didn't get tested because
Right.
Salter wasn't throwing the ball. Is Utah going to blitz 70% of the time on Cincinnati? Probably not. I would say
No, I
probably not.
wouldn't.
But I think that, I like this matchup for Utah. I think that, I these teams are very well matched. I think they're on very level footing to a certain extent. Um, and I know there's questions surrounding Utah's quarterback situation. If Bird will play, if Devin will play, who's going to start. But I think that, Kyle Whittingham said that Bird has the full offense at his disposal. So I think that that's something to, think about. Yeah, he wasn't as accurate as we thought he was going to be, but his first start, like, he's a true freshman. He's 18 years
Right.
old, but like, he was going to have some mistakes. And like,
Sure.
and to be fair, a couple of those balls were not on him. He put it right on his receiver's hands and they dropped it. So those aren't on him. Those are on his pass catchers. But I do like Utah in this game. I think that, Rice Eccles at night is a beast of its own. Rice
Mhm.
Eccles at night when when the team wears their all black uniform is another beast in and of itself. And so I like Utah. I think, Cincinnati's not the best passing defense. They're 13th in the Big 12. They've
No.
only had the one or they've only created one interception this season as well. So I think that, if Utah's going to throw the ball, they're going to need to throw the ball effectively. If, they end up running the ball, they're going to have to run the ball effectively. Like, there's a lot of things that I think need to work for Utah, but um I don't really like this game. It gives off, like, I felt like really confident for most of Utah's other games this season that they were going to win. But like, this one is one of those ones where it's like, I'm confident, but it's like less so. It's like on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably like at a 5 on a confidence scale that Utah's going to do it, just because, recency bias. Utah has crumbled under pressure the last 2 times that, a pregame show has come into town, or you've been involved in it, because obviously it was down at BYU for Big Noon. But still, I like this matchup. I think Utah's good. If Utah can limit Sorsby and the ground game, I think that they're able to handle them on defense, which I think is a good thing. And then offensively, this team has been really good at letting opposing defenses beat you. So like Colorado, for example, Colorado couldn't stop anything on the ground. So Utah beat them on the ground. West Virginia couldn't stop in the secondary. Utah threw the ball a lot. Arizona State couldn't stop the run. They ran the ball a lot. So Utah's done a really good job of taking what the defense gives and letting defenses beat them themselves. And I think that's going to be the case again this week.
Yeah. Game day being there. I mean, granted, the game day is going to be there early in the morning and the game's late at night. I'm just going to guess. And again, this is just me guessing, but I'm just going to guess that that's not going to deter the atmosphere from being absolutely berserk just because you have to wait all day for the football game. I'm just guessing.
It's going to give fans the opportunity to pregame and to tailgate all day. That's what it's going to do. That's what it's going to do. And, I know people talk about Utah's game day curse and stuff, because I think the last stat I saw was Utah's 2-9 in game day appearances. But that's like, the thing is like, I'm not a big person who believes in those like curses and things like that. Like, I think that, there's coincidences and stuff. And
right.
This just happens to be one. Like, obviously the last time game day came to town was 2023 when Oregon came to town and Utah got waxed. They what Utah just did to Colorado is what Oregon did to Utah when game day came to town. So it was really bad. But I think this team is different. And Kyle said that game day does a good job at not posing additional distractions to these guys. And they're very good about being like hands off and stuff to a certain extent. Like obviously the guys have to do their interviews and stuff, but other than that, like it's nothing different. And I know Utah fans love when game day comes to town. They love being on this national stage and stuff. And, I'm glad that finally a Big 12 team is getting, a game day experience. I would have been happy if it was any Big 12 team, but for it to be Utah Cincinnati, I think is even better because they chose the right game this week. I feel like, they could have come to Salt Lake for Texas Tech, Utah, but they didn't. They went to Coral Gables to watch Miami and Florida and stuff. And so, the right decision was finally made, and Utah fans always take the advantage of it. They love game day. The signs will be good. I've seen some signs that people are bringing out, which will be fun, but I'm excited. It's going to be a long day. I'm probably going to be up there from like 6 a.m. to like 2 a.m. probably. I might go home and take a nap. I don't know. It's kind of up in the air right now, but it's going to be fun. Utah fans are going to turn out and they're going to be loud and they're going to be excited for this one.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's one of the better games of the entire college football weekend. Yeah. It's going to be a crazy atmosphere. I'm hoping for a good football game. Just for, I cover the Big 12, just for the perspective of the Big 12 in general. I hope it's a good football game. I don't care who wins, but I just want it to be a good football game because, again, both of these teams have an opportunity to get to the college football playoff, both of them. Yep. I mean, I've been trying to remind people all week because some people are like, you got 2 losses in the conference, you can't make it. And I'm like, well, both teams were in the Big 12 title game last year, had 2 losses in conference. I go, so having 2 losses doesn't make you out of anything at this point. So I think it's going to be a good football game. That's what I think. I hope so.
I hope it is.
Yeah, I hope it's a good football game. And just for the conference sake, Utah, Cincinnati, both of their teams' sake, just to kind of give some national, pub to both teams.
Yeah.
I think they both deserve it. We don't get enough in this conference. It's ridiculous, but it is. We could talk about that all day. I won't do that now. But I appreciate you, Sammy, again, as always, giving us your time. For anybody who doesn't know where you are and all the good stuff that you do, please let everybody know.
You can follow me on Twitter at @S_247. You can follow the Ute Zone account at Ute Zone. And then you can come check us out at utezone.com. One of the greatest communities for Utah fans on the internet. Lots of VIP content coming out in the next couple of days. I have a couple of recruiting stories going up, just breakdowns on stuff. We have our own VIP podcast. So if you join utezone.com, you can come listen to me and our publisher, Dan Sorensen, talk about Utah football, go on little soapboxes, rant about certain things, and just have a good time. Join us over at Ute Zone. And I really hope it's a good game. I really hope I'm not pulling my hair out by the third quarter. And I hope that Utah finally gets a ranked win this season because though they have one technically because Arizona State was ranked, but I hope they get another ranked win this weekend.
Absolutely. So I appreciate you, Sammy. Thank you. And thank everybody else for tuning in. I'll be doing some traveling this weekend, but I'll still be around. So don't worry about it. I appreciate everybody and thank you. And we will talk to you soon.
Thank you for watching the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. This has been a Spirit Street production.